I paid a lot for a window seat, but a woman came up and demanded that I give it to her son because he wanted to see the clouds. Traveling by plane is already a chaotic experience in itself. Endless queues, absurd prices for a snack the size of a Post-it note, and that classic show of people occupying the aisle at boarding time as if it were a music festival. But nothing prepared me for what was about to happen on that flight. I, Nathan, had bought a ticket for a flight from New York to Los Angeles. As someone who hates being squeezed in the middle and hates having to get up every time for the aisle passenger, I made the strategic investment. I paid extra for a window seat. It wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. I wanted to sleep without being poked by strangers going to the bathroom every 5 minutes. My job as a photographer meant I was returning from an exhausting 3-day shoot with barely any sleep. This window seat would be my sanctuary for the next 6 hours, my chance to finally rest against something other than another human shoulder. Everything seemed perfect. That's when she appeared. A woman, I'd later hear her introduce herself to others as Brenda, emerged from the corridor with a boy of about 7, clinging to her side. The boy was hopping from one foot to the other, clearly excited for the journey. She looked at her seat number, then at mine, and before I could even say anything, I felt I was about to be dragged into some kind of nonsense. "Oh, you're sitting there. So, my son loves to ride by the window. It's his dream. Couldn't you swap places with him?" It's always like that. There's always someone trying to swap seats on the plane, as if we were at a toy swap fair. But I hadn't bought just any seat. I'd paid extra for it. And besides, I already knew that if I gave in, I'd end up in the worst seat possible, probably in the middle between a guy snoring and someone eating Cheetos with their mouth open. I looked at her and gave her a polite smile. "I'd rather take my seat, thanks." If Brenda had been a normal person, she would have understood and moved on. But no. For some people, the word no activates a special kind of internal hatred, as if they had been personally offended. She frowned, held her bag tighter, and sighed loudly, the kind that demands the whole world notice the drama. Wow, what a lack of empathy. And at that moment, I knew this woman wasn't going to let it go. She wanted the whole plane to know that I was a heartless monster who had destroyed an innocent child's dream. Just as standoff was unfolding, the passenger assigned to the aisle seat in our row approached a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a military haircut and the posture to match. He glanced between us, immediately sensing the tension. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl. "This man refuses to let my son sit by the window," Brenda said immediately, as if she'd found an ally. The man, who introduced himself as Jack, placed his carry-on in the overhead bin and assessed the situation carefully. "Assigned seats?" he asked simply. "Yes," I replied. "I paid extra for the window." Jack nodded, a look of understanding crossing his face. "Ma'am, I'm in the aisle. You're welcome to have my seat if you prefer not to sit in the middle." Brenda's face tightened. This wasn't the support she was looking for. If you've dealt with slackers before, you'll know that they never take no for an answer. They keep trying like a pushy salesman who doesn't understand that you don't want a new credit card. Brenda kept staring at me, clearly expecting me to change my mind out of sheer embarrassment. But I was used to this kind of game. I didn't mind the stares or the manufactured drama. She snorted, looked at her son, and decided she needed a new strategy. First, she started with the visible suffering approach. She sat next to the boy, who took the middle seat, and crossed her arms, letting out little grumbles. Then came the indignant whisper phase, where she started talking to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. Some people just don't know how to be kind. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that the boy didn't even seem that affected. He was already busy fiddling with the tablet, probably more interested in playing Minecraft than looking out of the window. In other words, the whole drama was hers and hers alone. Jack settled into the aisle seat, pulling out a book. He shot me a glance that seemed to say, "Good luck with this one," before immersing himself in his reading. Then came Brenda's final card. She leaned a little towards me and, in a tone that mixed contempt and a last-ditch attempt to embarrass me, let loose. "I just hope that one day, when you have children, someone will treat them with a little more kindness than you treated mine." That was it. Now I was a Disney movie villain. HOA? I was tempted to push back, explaining that I had paid for the seat, and that if she wanted a window seat so badly, she could have done the same. But then I looked at the clock. The flight was going to take more than 5 hours, and from the way Brenda was behaving, I already knew this wasn't going to stop there. She didn't just want the seat, she wanted complete victory, and if she didn't get it, she was going to make sure the rest of the flight was hell for me. Jack lowered his book slightly. "First flight?" he asked the boy, his tone friendly. The kid, momentarily looking up from his tablet, nodded. "You know, when I was your age, I was terrified of flying," Jack continued. "Now I do it every week for work." The middle seats actually got the best view of the safety demonstration. I appreciated his attempt to defuse the situation, but Brenda wasn't having it. "He doesn't need to see the safety demonstration. He needs to see the clouds," she snapped. Jack raised an eyebrow but returned to his book without another word. If I thought her drama was going to end there, it was because I hadn't yet understood the infinite capacity certain people have for turning a personal problem into a world event. Brenda realized that a direct attack didn't work. I didn't give in, I didn't get rattled by the hints, and I didn't let myself get carried away by the emotional theatrics. Then she changed tactics. If before it had been a confrontation between the two of us, now she wanted witnesses. She began to speak louder, as if she were making a casual comment, but making sure that everyone around her heard. It's unbelievable. No one has any consideration for a single mother traveling with a child anymore. There you go. Now I wasn't just a monster who denied a simple request. Now I hated single mothers too. The lady on the other side of the row looked quickly in our direction, curious to understand what was going on. The guy sitting in front of her glanced discreetly over his shoulder. That's all Brenda wanted. An audience. The boy, on the other hand, didn't care. He continued to be entertained by his tablet, his headphones blocking out any sign of drama coming from his mother. Deep down, I was pretty sure this wasn't even about him. It was about her, about getting what she wanted, and, more importantly, coming out as the wronged heroine of the story. If someone else spoke up for her, if a stranger said, "Let the child sit there, what's the harm?" she would have the validation she needed to insist even more. But the problem with this kind of move is that you never know if the audience will react the way you want them to. And luckily for me, the people on the flight seemed too tired to get involved in this circus. The lady on the other side just gave a half-hearted smile and looked straight ahead again. The guy in front completely ignored her. A stewardess passed by, handing out drinks, and didn't even notice what was going on. This seemed to make Brenda even angrier. She needed a reaction, and if no one on the plane was going to give it, she had another option: the crew. She pressed the call button so hard that I almost felt the seat vibrate. If she couldn't force me out, then she'd make someone in authority try to bend me over. And at that moment, I realized that she was willing to go to any lengths to win this ridiculous battle. Jack looked up from his book again, watching the situation unfold with increasing interest. He caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod of support, which Brenda noticed. "Oh, I see how it is. You men are all sticking together," she hissed. Jack closed his book, placing it carefully on his lap. "Ma'am, I haven't said a word." "You don't have to. It's all over your face," she retorted. I knew it would come to that. Some people just don't know how to lose. Brenda stood there, arms crossed, tapping her foot lightly against the floor, staring at the call button, as if she had just activated a grand plan of revenge. She didn't just want me to get out of my seat. She wanted someone to do it for her. In less than a minute, a flight attendant appeared, smiling, professional, the typical polite tone of someone who has dealt with all kinds of nonsense in this world. "How can I help you?" Brenda took a deep breath, as if she was holding back tears. This was when she was going to unleash her final card. "Look, I wouldn't normally complain, but I'm having a very difficult journey. I'm a single mother, and my son was so excited to sit in the window seat, but this guy here refuses to change." She paused dramatically, expecting the flight attendant to look at me with contempt, as if I had kicked a puppy. But to her misfortune, that didn't happen. The flight attendant just smiled and asked politely, "Did you pay for the seat?" "Yes," I replied immediately. Brenda became visibly tense. She knew that from that moment on, the situation was no longer in her control. The flight attendant nodded and turned to the outraged mother. "Madam, unfortunately, seats are assigned according to the purchase of the ticket. If this passenger has paid for this seat, they have the right to stay there." And that's when the big twist came. Brenda realized that her plan was falling apart, and decided that if being polite didn't work, maybe going on the attack would be better. She raised her voice a little, not exactly shouting, but enough to attract attention. "Really? So a selfish grown man can't give up a simple seat to an innocent boy? That's ridiculous. That's it. Now I was a selfish adult man, and her son was an innocent boy wronged by society. The problem? She didn't realize that she had made a fatal mistake, because at that moment, everyone around her realized that she was trying to pull a stunt. The flight attendant kept her professional smile, but her gaze hardened. "Ma'am, the passenger is entitled to his seat. If there are any more problems, we'll need to discuss it with the security team when we land." A new voice suddenly joined the conversation. A woman sitting across the aisle who had been quietly observing the entire scene. "Excuse me," she said, her voice surprisingly authoritative. "I'm a child psychologist, and I've been watching this interaction. That boy is perfectly content with his tablet. This isn't about what he wants. It's about what you want." Brenda's face flushed deep red. "How dare you? You don't know anything about my son." "I know that he hasn't once looked up from his screen or expressed any interest in the window," the woman replied calmly. "And creating this scene is teaching him that tantrums work." Several passengers around us murmured in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably, perhaps feeling Brenda was being ganged up on. The division in the cabin was palpable. some clearly on my side, others possibly sympathetic to a mother traveling alone with her child. Jack cleared his throat. I think we all need to calm down. We've got a long flight ahead. With that sentence, Brenda officially lost the war. But I knew she wasn't going to let it go. People like that never accept defeat with their heads held high. She needed one last blow, and that's exactly what she tried to do. If Brenda had any sense at all, she would have accepted defeat and continued her flight in silence. But she didn't. People like her don't know how to lose without turning the whole situation into an Emmy-worthy soap opera. After the flight attendant made it clear that I was entitled to my seat, Brenda realized that she had no more support. The crew weren't going to force anyone to change seats. The surrounding passengers were visibly annoyed by her little show. Even her own son didn't seem to care anymore, focused on his tablet and completely oblivious to the circus put on by his mother. But instead of shutting up and accepting the flight like any normal person, she decided to double down on the role of wronged victim. She remained silent for a few minutes. Only it wasn't a normal silence. It was a performative silence. First, it began with long, dramatic sighs, the kind you only hear in Mexican soap operas when the protagonist discovers a betrayal. Then she moved on to wiping invisible tears from the corner of her eyes, as if she had just received devastating news. And then came the final blow. She started crying. Yes, she cried. It wasn't a scandalous cry full of screams and sobs. It was that kind of carefully controlled crying, with discreet sniffles and her head turned slightly to one side, making sure that a few people around her noticed. She wanted someone to feel guilty for her. She wanted someone, anyone, to look at me with judgment and say, "You could have given up the seat to the poor, tired mother." Except there was a problem. No one else fell for it. The passengers were tired. They just wanted to get on with the flight without any more courtroom scenes. The flight attendant had already made it clear that I wasn't obliged to change seats. And most importantly, her son didn't give a damn about the window. Jack, who had been silent for a while, suddenly spoke up. "Ma'am, would you like to swap with me? I'm on the aisle. Might be easier for you to get up if your son needs anything." It was a peace offering, but it only seemed to infuriate Brenda more. "That's not the point," she snapped. "The point is, he," she jabbed a finger in my direction, "should have basic human decency." The child psychologist across the aisle shook her head disapprovingly. "And this is the example you're setting for your child?" The comment caused a visible split among the passengers. Some nodded in agreement, while others shot sympathetic glances at Brenda. A man a few rows back loudly said, "Oh, give her a break already," while a woman near him countered with, "Why should anyone reward this behavior?" The flight attendant, sensing the growing tension, stepped in again. "I'm going to have to ask everyone to keep their voices down. If this continues, I'll need to involve the captain." And that seemed to be the reality check Brenda needed. Gradually, she realized that her performance wasn't working. She discreetly looked around, hoping for a sympathetic glance, but only found bored people. I continued to ignore them completely, and that's when the flight finally went as it should. When we landed, Brenda jumped up aggressively, grabbed her hand luggage, and rushed off without looking back. She was probably angry at having lost the battle, but she didn't have the heart to try anything else. As passengers were filing out, Jack turned to me. "Combat veteran," he explained, gesturing to himself, "and that was still one of the most intense battles I've witnessed." The child psychologist stopped by our row on her way out. "In my professional opinion," she said with a wry smile, "you dodged a bullet. Imagine if you had given in. She'd have found something else to complain about." And so my saga with the seat inspector ended. Moral of the story: if someone wants a specific seat, they just have to pay for it. Now tell me, have you ever had to deal with people like that? Someone who thinks the world should revolve around their wishes? Or do you think I should have just given up my seat and avoided the drama? The comments section is always divided on stories like these. Some viewers tell me I was being stubborn over something small, while others say giving in to entitled behavior only encourages more of it. What would you have done? Tell us in the comments, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Want to see more absurdities like this? Click on the card and I'll see you in the next video. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Let me know below.